As an operator, I know other investors are romanticizing multifamily investing, and I'm looking to learn from other investors' mistakes. I know you are too, and you found the right place. Welcome to Myers Methods Presents Multifamily Missteps. Hey everybody, and welcome to Myers Methods Presents Multifamily Missteps. I'm your host Jerome, and I've got Chris Lento with me today. Chris, how are things in Boston?
Things are kind of strange right now. We're right in the middle of the COVID pandemic, so it's kind of dead, but weather's good and, life goes on.
Yeah. So if the listeners want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Probably my website, it's emcapitalgroup.com or email Chris Lento at emcapitalgroup.com.
Awesome. Now that we've got the important stuff out the way, let's talk about some things. Give the listeners a little bit about your background and what your current focus is.
So I've been doing multifamily investing for about 15 years, full-time for 3 years. Prior to that, I was in the aerospace and defense industry. So I actually did rocket science to some degree. And not all of it's as hard as people think. And so kind of did passive stuff on the side, or not passive stuff, but kind of smaller deals on my own on the side. And then graduated into larger properties. Currently, I'm looking at kind of southeastern U.S. and Midwest properties, 100 unit range, Class B's, kind of mainly my focus. And I'm also doing some smaller condo conversions of some of my deals that I have in Boston. So actually, those are like on hold right now. Everything in Boston's a full stop. So they're just sitting there racking up holding costs. But that should get on track as soon as things open up. So that's sort of where I'm at right now, just kind of gauging what happens next.
Yeah, I think everybody's looking for the crystal ball, but it doesn't.
Right.
So we just got to wait and see. What? I know you told me you got two different missteps you want to chat about. I think I want to go to the juicy one first, right? And so let's talk about plumbing, man. Have you had plumbing?
I have had issues with plumbing. So it's an exciting topic, right? Plumbing. Who doesn't love toilets and plumbing? Um, so on a deal that I bought in Tallahassee, it was a 24 unit deal, 1988 build. And during the due diligence, actually prior to the due diligence, I had found out that it had polybutylene piping. So I'm sure you've come across this. Every kind of decade of construction in the last 50 years has some sort of thing that is a major problem, right? So there's like galvanized piping in the 50s and 60s. There's aluminum wiring in the 70s. And the 80s had, among other things, polybutylene piping. So it's a water supply line piping. It's sort of like today's PEX, but it's brittle. So it has these pinhole pipes that form, and you sort of never know when they're going to explode. I mean, in short. So if you have a property, a lot of times the lenders look for this. Like they want to know, like, oh, is there any aluminum wiring in the property? Is there any poly B or polybutylene piping in the property? So I found out early on that this property did have polybutylene piping in some of the units, but it was not disclosed. So so I knew that. So I kind of put that in my underwriting as like this, a certain number of units have this, and I have to figure out how to deal with it. And I kind of putting that in said that I think it's still a good deal. So when I approached the owner, going through the sales process, I did raise it and say, hey, this wasn't disclosed, and it was part of our negotiations. So I kind of went in with eyes open on that. So now that's relatively open, meaning like I might have a problem down the road. I need to budget in some CapEx to fix this over 5 years kind of thing. And the fix is really repiping, like going through every unit that has the problem and changing out the supply line piping, which depending on, access is maybe $2,000 to $3,000 per unit. So it's not insignificant. So I buy the property, or closing the property on a Friday, and I'm on vacation actually in Denver visiting family. And Monday morning, I get a call that there's been a burst, second floor unit, supply line pipe in the ceiling burst, takes the ceiling down to that unit, and then serious damage to the 2 units below that unit. So day 3 of ownership, 3 units pretty much down, and they're all occupied.
So what do you do when that happens?
So to start, I had a good property manager in place. Well, now I know they were good, but they were new. I just bought the property. So I immediately talked to them, and they, without even talking to me first, had immediately called Service Pro. So whenever there's a water damage situation, there's a couple companies like water remediation companies, but I think Service Pro is basically the only one I've ever heard of. They're national, and they come in with water vacuums, dehumidifiers. They'll gut take the wet drywall from the ceiling to expose the pipe so the plumber can go in and actually fix the leak. So, property manager turned off the water, plumber came, fixed the leak, basically patched the leak, didn't fix the problem, but patched the act. And then got in there with dehumidifiers and, shop vacs effectively, and blowers. And that's sort of like, triage, like how do you stop the bleeding, basically. After that, I immediately got in touch with a private insurance adjuster, a public insurance adjuster. And it depends, who's listening to this, but this is a concept I came across probably 10 years ago, and it's been invaluable. So sort of like if you're going to go to court to defend yourself for like a criminal case, you wouldn't go with the prosecutor's lawyer, right? Well, when you're talking to your insurance company about an insurance claim, and I would say, in my opinion, if it's over, say, like a $3,000 claim, it's good to have an insurance adjuster that's on your side, and that's called a public adjuster. So you basically call a public adjuster. I talk to my property manager, talk to the closing attorney, basically talk to all my contacts in the area. This is in Tallahassee, and got the name of a couple of public adjusters. So they effectively serve as your insurance adjuster. They take 10% of whatever you get from the insurance company for the claim. And they kind of handle the process and argue with the insurance company's adjuster to make sure that you're getting, all you're entitled to. That was really the first step.
So, I mean, it sounds like a blank check is written when something like that happens. I want to make sure I got it. How many units were impacted overall?
It ended up being 3 units.
Okay.
So the whole ceiling fell. And then the units below, one of the closets and bathrooms, ceilings collapsed. And the other one just had sort of livable water damage in the ceiling.
And did you lose those 3 residents, or did you put them in a hotel and bring them back or something?
In the end, I lost 2 of the residents. So what happened was the people with the major collapse, it was 2 roommates, and it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, so they're very separate, almost like 2 suites. And it was one sort of suite that collapsed, and that guy was out of town for like 3 weeks, luckily. So his roommate said, I can still live in my part while you fix all this. And then, as it took a lot of effort, he just couldn't deal with it, so he just moved out. And I offered to put him in a hotel, but he's like, I don't want a hotel, I want an apartment. So it was somewhat amicable, or I did my best to help him out, and I think I gave him some money towards, obviously his security deposit was returned in full, and there was some restitution made for damage. And then one of the units below, I moved to a different unit that had came available. And then the other unit with minor damage was able to be sort of remediated in place.
A lot of people want to be profitable multifamily operators but lack the knowledge, deal flow experience, and capital to be successful. They often try to overcome these challenges out of order, slowing or eliminating their ability to get their next deal done. We've developed a framework that allows them to gain the knowledge they need to find profitable deals. When they do, they create the time and location freedom, as well as the generational wealth they desire for their family. The Myers methods of multifamily investing have proved to be the fastest way to establish credibility and profitably grow an apartment portfolio. If you want to know more about our 4-step process, jump over to myersmethods.com to get our free 4-step guide to getting into multifamily investing. Let's get back to the episode. Got it. So did insurance cover all of that stuff, or did you guys have to go in pocket?
Well, so it took probably 3 months to kind of iron out all the insurance. Insurance pretty much pays the, like they'll definitely pay all your water remediation stuff, like the service pro bill. They'll pay that pretty much almost upfront. But everything else, you know, they kind of do the insurance dance where pretty soon they offer you a check, like, hey, we'll give you a 20 grand check like today, but because they don't want a larger check in the future. So it took about 3 months with the public adjuster and go back and forth and the estimates. So it was out of pocket for the near term stuff. And then I would say in the end, it's sort of hard to say whether they covered all the damage because I took the opportunity to renovate all those units. So, new cabinets, countertops. So I would say they covered definitely the damage plus a good portion of the upgrades.
That makes a lot of sense. So here's a magic question. And if you have an answer to this, I'm going to be amazed. Did you make a process change to prevent this from happening again?
Well, I certainly expedited my plan to change out the piping. And I kind of have a plumber on call now who is taking any sign of a leak very seriously. And, we have sort of implemented a repiping plan. One thing I haven't done, and I'm kind of in the process of doing right now, is coming up with an in-place repiping plan. So figuring out a way that we can get the piping done while people are in the unit, which is pretty much impossible right now that we're all locked down, but I think doable. I think I might have lost you.
No, I think that is amazing, using that engineering background.
Yeah.
And so that will move us into the other misstep that you're willing to share with the audience. And so let's talk about that one a little bit.
Yeah, so this one wasn't as major, but it had to do with the lending on the same property. So this was my first agency loan. So I had a broker that I had a relationship with who did agency financing, and he also did commercial-backed security financing and then a number of local banks. So he was truly sort of a broker. And then I had another relationship with really a Freddie lender. So I was kind of going through the process. I had the property under contract, and I was talking to both of them, and it turned out that the mortgage broker actually used the Freddie lender as his agency financer. So I effectively got 2 different calls from 2 different people that I had relationships with saying, hey, are you shopping this around? Because we're like the same group effectively, which was a difficult conversation because the broker was offering me a product, which was a good Freddie Mac loan that had a 1% fee on it. And then the Freddie Mac originator was offering me pretty much the same product with no fee. And, obviously, I went with the lower fee option, but it created an awkward situation. So that was a lesson learned, kind of figure out if you're going through a broker, where do they go for their different debt sources, and make sure you don't overlap that. Right?
So did you tell them that, hey, like one is less fee than your fee.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was still a tough conversation.
What did they say when you share with them that you were hip to the game?
It wasn't so much that I was hip to the game. It was that, Fannie and Freddie have their designated loan providers and there's not an infinite number of those. There's a certain number for each region. And so one of the brokers I was going to was one of those, and who that really just dealt in Fannie and Freddie products. And the other was more of a broker that does a large range of products, one of which he'll do Fannie or Freddie. So you're sort of, I guess what I learned from that was, if you know that you are going to go kind of conventional agency financing, just go directly to an agency loan provider and not a broker. But if you have a more complicated deal, you need bridge financing, you have low occupancy, then a broker that has a lot of different financing options is an approach.
Got it. So the final question.
So I guess the second aspect of this just was, so we go to closing, and 3 days before closing, the Freddie Mac underwriters do their final kind of underwriting, and rather than underwriting a repair allowance or a repair cost of $850 per unit, they look at the historicals for this property because it had a prior financing from Freddie Mac, and historicals are $1,250 per unit. So they apply the historicals, really last minute, 3 days before closing. And my loan to value changes from 75 to 71. And I have to come to the table with another $65,000. So that was probably the bigger wrinkle in this financing story. So I basically pushed back. I went back to the sales broker who really had all the numbers and had all the owner's information, and said, hey, fix this. Convince this lender that the costs are only $850. And so we sort of went back and forth, and it was 2 weeks of kind of holding out. And I've been told by a number of people that a lot of times that they'll meet you in the middle. If you're saying $850 and industry standards $850, but the lender says $1,250, they'll kind of come in around $1,000. But no, they held firm. So I had to go get another $65,000 bring to the table at closing.
How'd you do that?
I tapped into a home equity line.
Wow.
Yeah. So luckily I had that available, but really that was for a lot of CapEx. I had some money set aside for CapEx improvements on the property that just all went into this closing. So now I had to kind of come up with other money for the CapEx going down the road, which pushed the timeline on a lot of things. I was planning to do more unit upgrades over the first 3 years than I'm doing because of that.
Man. Well, got that, guys? Make sure you got a home equity line in the bag just in case you need an extra 60.
The one thing I didn't learn on that was find out who's financed the current property. So, your seller, who's their loan with? And if you're getting financing from that same group, know that they will have the historical financials. So you could either, let's just say the historical financials don't look great. Switch agencies. If it's a Freddie loan, go with Fannie, because they're going to look at your numbers and industry standards rather than the actuals, because they don't have the actuals. Also, just if you're going to stay with the same lender, be aware of that they're going to look at the actuals because they have them. They require you to report your financials on at least annual basis. So be aware of that and expect kind of deviations at closing.
Wow. That is key right there. So the last question, and you may have just given them to us, but what's your words of wisdom to the listeners?
I would say for problems, reach out, right? Like there's a lot of nuances and things that can go wrong in multifamily investing, but rarely are they new. rarely has someone else not already dealt with the situation. So, check out podcasts, check out other people's websites, call other investors that may have gone through similar situations, go on Bigger Pockets and post a question. Just reach out, because there's a lot of solutions out there that maybe you wouldn't have thought of, and it can save you a lot of time and money.
Beautiful. Chris, I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to share with our listeners, and we'll talk soon, man. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
You made it to this juncture, so you really love what we shared on this episode of Myers Methods Presents Multifamily Missteps. Do us a favor, give us a 5-star rating, give us a review, and share this with somebody who's interested in multifamily investing. Until the next time, the pack is with you.